19-year-old Sade Robinson left her apartment for a first date on April 1st, 2024, and after a few hours with this man, she would never be seen alive again. Days later, unsuspecting Milwaukee citizens began discovering severed human body parts across public parks and on the shores of Lake Michigan. Not only had Sade met such a brutal end, but her body was scattered around town like some sort of sick scavenger hunt. And with that, police were on their own hunt for her killer. Outlaw. Hello, and welcome to OUTLORE Podcast. I'm Eleanor Neale, and in today's episode, we're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2024, where a whole severed human leg has just been discovered by a member of the public. A horrifying discovery, regardless of the context, and right now, police had absolutely none. They weren't yet aware that a young woman had disappeared the night before. They weren't yet aware that this severed leg would lead them to a man so depraved, so twisted, that he had set up a thrill kill. And poor Sade had walked into a trap she didn't even know had been set long in advance. Now, before we get into this case, I just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no harm or disrespect to anyone that we talk about in today's case. Our episodes are made with the utmost care to honour those who lost their lives and respect the profound grief that their loved ones endure. Given the nature of today's episode, we'll be covering some very sensitive topics, including sexual assault, torture, mutilation, domestic violence, and murder. This episode is created with the hope to raise awareness, inspire change, and further victim support. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, quickly, before we get started, I do want to take a moment to talk about my research process because, obviously, in order to make these episodes, we wade through hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents and articles and data-heavy files, and staying safe online while we do it is so critical. Using NordVPN makes everything not only so much safer, but so much better, and I want to say a huge thank you to them for collaborating to make today's episode possible. Nord is quite literally my internet bodyguard. I can't go online without it. I use them for fast and secure streaming at home and while traveling. And with my job, I travel a lot. So not only do I love that I can still access all of the UK media that I'm subscribed to while I'm abroad, but the security that Nord offers while online is incredible. Obviously, with traveling that much, I end up using public Wi-Fi quite a bit, which can put me at risk to potential hackers and data breaches. But with Nord, I'm always protected. Because did you know that NordVPN have a literal kill switch that you can put on to make sure that none of your data is ever exposed, even by accident? Your traffic is always protected with robust encryption. Plus, they don't share or track any of your online activity, which I personally love because I kind of get it in my head that my search engines are spying on me sometimes. So I like that. But it's not just how strongly they're able to protect your data. There are so many incredible features available when you use Nord. Things like Threat Protection Pro that spot dodgy websites and detect at least 85% of all phishing sites. They can keep you safe from malware and from dangerous ads. And obviously, I've got you a little offer, an exclusive NordVPN deal, plus 4 months extra when you click the link in the description below. That's nordvpn.com/Eleanor. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks again to Nord for making this episode possible. Now, let's start from the very, very beginning of today's case, starting with the birth of the beautiful Sade Robinson. It was May 10th, 2004, in Vicksburg, Mississippi, when parents Sheena and Carlos welcomed their beautiful baby girl, Sade Carlina Robinson. Before her second birthday, her parents split up, and her mother moved herself and Sade out to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to live with her parents. And Sade loved living with Grandma and Granddad. But soon, a whole new family unit would form. A stepdad would enter the picture, and eventually a half-sister too. Sade's early childhood might sound a little bit rocky on paper. Parents split, moving states, new father figure. But it all happened when she was so young that all she would really remember as she grew older was the secure family unit that she had by the age of 5. She adored her stepdad and her new baby sister, Adriana. She loved being a big sis, and her biological father was still as involved in her life as he possibly could be from states away. He still adored her, and he still wanted to be in her life. Sade was so surrounded by love and by people that cared for her enormously. She was a very happy child, and from a young age, she had such a little personality. She was social, fun, outgoing, active, and adventurous. She joined Girl Scouts, she did dance classes, she played soccer, she loved performing too. A girl of many interests and many talents. But as she grew up, Sade began having a hard time in school. So she moved to Florida to live with her dad for a while, and she attended a new school out there, but she ultimately went back to finish high school in Milwaukee. We read that she'd really struggled with her mental health and depression in her teen years, which I'm sure many of us can relate to and know how horrendous it is to go through such inner turmoil growing up when you're still trying to make sense of life. But Sade made it out the other side, with fabulous grades and her sparkling personality still intact. She was even able to graduate a semester early. She was so bright, she worked so hard, and she was destined for great things. But there had been some people along the way who had tried to break her, and since moving back to Milwaukee, Sade had actually been the victim of stalking and sexual assault by a friend that she had trusted. After such a traumatic incident, her guard was up all the time now. Obviously, it was hard to trust people. She was wary of everyone, and so she became extremely independent. By the age of 19, she rented her own apartment, she worked 2 part-time jobs in order to pay her bills, one at a pizza place as a cashier, and another at a members-only club as waitstaff. Sade was a hustler and a very reliable worker. She never missed a shift. She never turned up late. And if she was even running 5 minutes behind, she would send a text to let her boss know. She was so responsible. And she was doing all of this while studying a degree in criminal justice. She was amazing. By March 2019, she was only a month away from finishing that course. In fact, her graduation was planned to be on her 20th birthday, a very clear end to the chapter of her teenage years and a fresh start into adulthood. Sade was thinking long and hard about what she wanted to do after graduation. There were a few career paths that she was weighing up, one of which was joining the US Air Force. Her own family was full of veterans. Her grandfather was now retired from the US Navy. Her uncle was also retired from the Army. It was in the family. She had grown up hearing all these stories, and so it seems that she was leaning mostly towards that. But in the meantime, she studied her ass off, and she spent her free time hanging out with her loved ones. According to her friends and family, Sade was so kind, so generous, and just the absolute definition of a social butterfly. She loved to chat to anyone and everyone. She would talk to strangers. She would make friends wherever she went. She would FaceTime her mum and update her on her life and fill her in on her plans. And on the 31st of March 2019, Sade had some very specific plans. She was prepping for a first date the next day with a guy that she had met out and about. It seems no one knows for sure just where or when Sade met this man. It's mostly suspected that they met at the bar that this guy worked at. But the fact of the matter is, Sade was excited to see him. She had told practically everyone that she crossed paths with that she was going on a date. Her co-workers, her mum, her friends, even the maintenance guy who worked in her apartment complex. Of course, we mentioned Sade is a very chatty girl. That is just the kind of person she is. But she was also a very savvy girl. She was very big on safety. She always let everyone know where she was. She shared her location with her closest friends and family on the Life 360 app, which is a lot more than just a location sharing app. It can notify someone when your phone arrives and leaves each new location, basically compiling a log for those that you trust to share it with. And unfortunately, this becomes really important in Sade's case on the day that she disappeared. It was the 1st of April 2024. Sade was getting ready in her apartment around 4 p.m. when she sent her date a text. "Where are we meeting? I can do 5. He suggested a place downtown. It was like a German brewery that does those giant steins of beer. And he texts her saying, "Are you hungry? I'm gonna need to stop by Twisted Fisherman to pick up my W-2 from last year, and we could eat there first." Twisted Fisherman is like a seafood grill restaurant and bar that faces out onto the water. The guy that she's going on a date with used to work there and obviously needs to pick something up. He asked her if she would rather eat there or at the brewery, and Sade said, "Let's eat at Twisted. I'm feeling seafood." And by 5:30 p.m. that night on April the 1st, they are sitting together at the bar ordering food. The date seemed to go well enough that by 6:24 p.m. they decided to head to the next spot. They didn't end up going to that brewery in the end, but instead a bar that was much closer called Duke's on the Water. This was another place that her date had previously worked at. What a coincidence. But was it really a coincidence? Because actually, Sade was only 19 years old. In America, of course, you can't be served alcohol under the age of 21. So it seems that this man was pulling some strings with his former co-workers to get his underage date some alcohol. It's even worse when you eventually learn that the guy that was taking her on this date was 33 years old, dating a 19-year-old who can't legally be served alcohol in a bar. So that's the kind of guy we're dealing with here. Suspected man-child. But they head to this next bar, and it's from this point, based on CCTV footage of the date alone, that the vibe between them seems to change. This guy looks like he's almost ignoring Sade in favour of speaking to the couple next to him. She's just sat there off to the side by herself. And mind you, this is a social, outgoing woman. It's sad to see her be ignored like this. At around 9 p.m, they're ready to leave the bar. They pay the tab and they hop into Sade's car, heading back to her date's house. The last place that she would ever be seen alive. The morning after her date, Sade was scheduled to work a shift at the pizza restaurant. Now, I told you she was famously a reliable worker. Her bosses praised her for being such a great employee, so communicative. She never skipped shifts. She would book her time off well in advance. And like I said, even if she was running 5 minutes late, she would communicate. She would text. She would let people know. So when Sade didn't show up to work at all on April 2nd with no text, no call, her co-workers immediately worried because this was so unlike her. They texted her to see if she was okay, but it looked like the messages weren't even going through. They weren't even delivering. So was Sade's phone shut off? Again, this was weird for her. This is the same girl who has her live location shared with her closest people. She's not just going to shut her phone off for no reason. Her boss at the pizza place actually knew where Sade lived, and they were friends enough that she was like, right, okay, I'm just going to go around to her house and check on her and see if she's okay. So she jumped in her car and drove to Sade's apartment. But when she knocked and called for her, Sade didn't respond. No one came to the door. And her car was missing. So the boss contacted Sade's friends and family, who were all immediately concerned hearing this. They also know that this is so out of character for her. So they rush to check her recent locations on Life 360. And they were horrified by what they saw. The logs of Sade's location through the night paint a picture not of a successful first date, but of something much more sinister. She had gone back to her date's house after the bar. She drove the two of them there, and they were actually caught on a neighbour's security camera as they entered his house. Sade remained there, or at least her phone remained there until 12:45 a.m. Bear in mind, as I'm telling you these locations, it's not necessarily her, it's her phone. By 1 a.m, the tracker was heading towards downtown Milwaukee, and by 1:15, she seemed to have reached the area that her apartment was in. But she didn't turn into the parking lot. She didn't actually stop or slow down. She didn't go home. The tracker just keeps driving past her apartment building, getting further and further out, heading northbound. By 1:33 a.m, her location seems to settle at Pleasant Valley Park for about half an hour. And this is what really scared her family, because what 19-year-old girl is going out to a park alone in the dead of night and staying there for half an hour? But it's not even that, it's everything that comes next as well. The location begins to move again. For 10 minutes, it travels west and it settles once again in another park right on the river. It keeps doing this, travelling from park to park and lingering in each one through the early hours of the morning. From 3 to 4:30 a.m., her location is in Warnament Park for an hour and a half. Like, obviously, that can't be Sade. No 19-year-old girl is park hopping all alone in the middle of the night. Her phone battery died at 4:40 a.m. while it was still on the move further northbound. So at this stage, her family have no idea where Sade or where her phone had ended up. But one thing was clear. Something was wrong, and they needed to find her fast. By 9 p.m. on the day after her first date, Sade Robinson had been reported missing to the police. And actually, they'd already begun making headway in her case without even knowing what they were trying to solve yet. They had been receiving calls and clues and reports that would all soon link back to Sade Robinson. Earlier that morning, at 7:29 a.m., two women were walking along the sidewalk together when they watched as a man who had been parked outside of what seemed to be an abandoned building got out of the car, lit it on fire, and fled the scene. So the women are like, what the hell? They immediately go into a bit of a panic. One of them starts waving her arms, trying to draw anyone's attention that's around, warning people that this car might explode. Genuinely, what a bizarre and scary thing to witness, because why the hell would someone do that? And then walk away so casually as well. This man that had just gotten out of the car was unfazed. The women called the police and reported what they had just witnessed, and they were at the scene by 8:15 a.m. But by this point, the car had pretty much burnt out completely. The women described the suspect that they had seen as a tall white man wearing a tan backpack and a grey hoodie. A local CCTV camera caught an image of this man that backs up this description. Police ran checks on the car's plates and discovered that it belonged to a 19-year-old girl named Sade Robinson. At this stage, though, that didn't raise any alarm bells because police weren't familiar with Sade. She hadn't been reported missing yet. So they gather this information and they take it back to the station while the car is hauled off, I think to be kept in evidence while the case was investigated. Later that afternoon came a second lead in Sade's case, though again it's before she's reported missing, so it's not linked to her just yet, but a gruesome discovery had been made just after 5:30 p.m. Two men had been out walking in the rain in Warnament Park when they saw what appeared to be a whole human leg laying by the shores of Lake Michigan.
They walked down the S-curve from Sheridan, started walking south just for fun, rough day on the beach. As they were walking, see that leg right there? Yeah. Said that it was up about approximately where the end of that stick, that branch is. By the bushes right there. Yeah, bushes. Said that they saw it up there.
So it was up on the hill, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
So said that him and his buddy, who's in my squad right now, walked out, called us, and then when we came back, it was about, maybe 7 feet. 7 feet east.
By the rock.
I moved it just for evidence purposes.
Okay, so it gets swept away?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I documented it well on body cam with different angles of where it was.
Okay, cool. What's your name again, bud?
Evan.
Evan? Okay, Evan. How long were you out here?
About probably an hour.
An hour?
Yeah.
Okay. You usually come this way?
Yeah.
Yeah? The first time you seen anything here?
Yeah.
Yeah? It's the first time you seen anything like this?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Pretty quickly, it was determined that this leg belonged to a young black woman of about 5 feet in height, and importantly, the leg hadn't begun decomposition. This was very recent. Police were now trying to identify a dead woman from her leg. Later that night, in comes a report of a missing young black woman of about 5 feet in height. Police could already see where this was going. And so the very next day, they gained entry to Sade Robinson's apartment, but nothing was out of the ordinary in there. There was no sign of a struggle, no clues to her whereabouts. She hadn't left a note or anything. There was nothing to be learnt from her apartment. Her loved ones had told the police everything that they possibly could about Sade's last day, especially the first day, because it was becoming increasingly clear that they needed to hunt him down and ask him some questions. I don't know if her friends and family knew his name or not, but they certainly had all of her locations from that night. They'd seen that she'd been at Twisted Fisherman and at Duke's on the Water. So police could go down to those places and speak to the staff and grab the CCTV footage. They'd be able to identify and track down Sade's date pretty easily. Meanwhile, they had requested her phone logs from her network provider that would give them access to her text and call activity from earlier in the day on her date, because she'd been texting her date as she was getting ready, planning where they were going to meet and what time. And now that police had his phone number, they could trace it to a man named Maxwell Anderson. He was 33 years old, 14 years older than the 19-year-old girl he took out on a date. Maxwell Anderson was a bartender. Again, it's believed that they met at his place of work before they eventually planned and went on this date. And the thing about Maxwell Anderson is that police were very aware of him, and they weren't exactly shocked to see him linked to a violent case like this one. Maxwell was born into a wealthy family on the 26th of May, 1990. He lived his whole life in Wisconsin in a gorgeous big home. His dad was quite frankly rolling in it because he owned 2 different insurance companies, and so Maxwell grew up never wanting for anything. In fact, people that knew him said that he grew up bratty and entitled, never having been told no, everything always going his way. In 2014, Max was 24 years old when he got into an argument with a female family member. We're not exactly sure what relation she was to him, but we do know that in this confrontation, he pushed the woman. Not only that, but he was smashing things up around her. He smashed up her kitchen. He smashed up her phone. The poor woman had to call the police on him, and when they arrived, Max even said to the police officers, "What are you going to do? Shoot me?" And then he actually tried to make a run for it. He fled and jumped into the woman's car and only returned home after he had crashed it. And he was, of course, arrested for all of this. And then a year later, in 2015, he was arrested once again for getting violent and threatening at another family function when a relative suggested that Max should get a mental health check because his behaviour was so bad and something had to be wrong. He got so offended and so mad that he smashed a glass over the head of this family member. He punched a wall, and then when a family member tried to call the police to come and defuse the situation, he grabbed the phone out of their hand. This is a violent and angry man who can't control his emotions. He just keeps racking up charges for domestic violence and disorderly conduct. And then, in 2019, he was 29 years old and in trouble with the police again. A stranger had witnessed Maxwell being aggressive with a woman in public, possibly a girlfriend at the time. It made the stranger so uncomfortable and worried for the woman that they stepped in and said something to Max. And he just went mental. He punched this guy over and over again. He dragged him down to the floor and got on top of him, still punching him. Like, this was a properly violent assault. For this incident, Max got a year of probation, 25 hours of community service, and he was ordered to pay $7,000 in restitution to the victim for medical bills and for lost wages. Now, that is a lot of money. The fact that this guy needed that much hospital treatment afterwards and he couldn't work tells you just how awful that assault was. Maxwell Anderson is clearly very, very dangerous. He will attack strangers. He will attack loved ones. He seems at risk of attacking absolutely anyone that upsets him or challenges him in any way. And now they are connecting this violent man with the case of missing and tragically at this point presumed dead 19-year-old Sade Robinson. On the 4th of April, just 3 days after the date, police arrested Maxwell Anderson a few blocks from his home as he was waiting at a red light. When he was taken in for questioning, he was clearly trying not to give much away, but the evidence had mounted high enough that he didn't really need to talk. Police knew it was him. By now, the human leg that had been discovered by Lake Michigan had been taken to a lab where it was identified to be Sade Robinson's. They could also confirm at this point that the leg had been severed using a sharp instrument, essentially confirming that she was dismembered by whoever had killed her. ruling out any possibilities of her leg having been torn off by anything in nature, you know what I mean? This had been an intentional act by another human being. The burnt car that had been confirmed to be Sade's, the car that she had driven to Maxwell Anderson's house, the last place that she had been seen alive, revealed her clothes. The same outfit that she had worn on the date was burnt to a crisp in the back of that car. The car that Maxwell Anderson had driven out to a random street and set on fire to destroy evidence. Not only did the CCTV footage of the incident look exactly like him, but the grey hoodie that he was wearing that day was found in his car when he was arrested. The police obtained a search warrant for Max's home, which seemed rather unassuming, actually, until they got to the basement. As they went down the stairs leading to it, they spotted blood on the walls. And inside that basement was some sort of horror, sex, torture dungeon. And not like in a BDSM 50 Shades kind of way. This was literally like something out of a horror movie. There was a bed and a bunch of sex gear like hoists and handcuffs, and there was a curtain around the bed. But then there were a mass of weapons. Anything and everything that you could think of. An axe, firearms, power tools. He even had a wall with 51 knives on it. That's insane. There were also a few empty gas cans laying around, which were obviously the ones that he had used to torch Sade's stuff and possibly even her car. More blood was also found in Max's bedroom and in his bathroom. But here's where things get stranger. When the DNA testing of that blood comes back, it wasn't Sade's. It was someone else's. It wasn't Max's either. So did this mean that there were other victims? But with Max in custody, more developments would come, and more parts of Sade would be discovered. On the 6th of April, her other foot was found in a park close to where her car had been set on fire, along with other lumps of flesh that were confirmed to be hers. Now, we don't know if this was intentional, like her body really had been cut into shreds by her attacker, or if the scattering of her flesh and tissue was the work of animals. Either way, it's absolutely horrific. Around this time, Maxwell Anderson was officially charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and arson, and Sade Robinson was officially declared dead. Over the coming weeks and months, her remains continued to surface. Parts of her were found scattered in the parks that her Life 360 app had logged her location on the night that she disappeared. Her torso washed up on one of the shores, almost whole, but missing one of her breasts that had clearly been severed by her killer. At this point, it's clear that there was an element of enjoyment to the dismembering. It could have been argued up until this point that her killer had dismembered her body simply for ease of disposing it, but to intentionally cut off one of her breasts, that would make no difference to how he got rid of the torso. He just wanted to do that. He just had the desire to cut off one of her breasts. Over a month after her death, on the 18th of May, one of Sade's arms even washed up one state over in Illinois. As they slowly recovered these pieces of her, they sent them off for a post-mortem. But since most of her remains had been thrown into the water and washed up on the shores, carrying out any kind of detailed post-mortem or getting any kind of detailed answers was kind of impossible. When a body is found in water, especially if it's been there for a long time, a lot of the soft tissue may be destroyed. Any physical evidence like fingerprints or DNA are obviously washed away. Being in water also speeds up the rate of decomposition, so especially those pieces that were discovered weeks and months into the investigation will be almost impossible to get any information from. Nevertheless, the examiner was able to make some conclusions. She couldn't pinpoint Sade's exact cause of death, but she could, at the very least, tell that she had been stabbed. It's unclear whether that is the cause of death or just one of the awful things that happened to Sade Robinson as part of the attack on her. Honestly, now that we know that this guy has a whole entire torture dungeon under his house, it horrifies me to think what he could have done to Sade just for the fun of it, just because he was sick and twisted. Another thing to note though, and this is just so horrific, Sade's head has never been found. Still, to this day, Maxwell has never offered up where it is, no matter how much Sade's family beg him. So, unfortunately, they've never had the closure of having all of her back to be able to lay her to rest. Her mum, Sheena, has written letters to Sade's killer in jail, just begging him to give over the location, give over any information so that she can bury all of her baby. She's also begged his family to try to speak to him and try to get through to him and convince him to give over this information, but still, he's never said a word. At this stage, Maxwell was being held without bail, waiting for his court date, and he was pleading not guilty. He wasn't prepared to go down for his crimes without traumatizing Sade's family through a trial. But while he waited for his trial, as soon as the police had done their investigation in his home, Max's family sold his house 2 months after the murder, before the case has even gone to trial. Maybe they wanted it gone and filled by someone else so that it couldn't keep being checked for evidence and worsening their son's case. Who knows? Maybe it was sinister. Or maybe it was to get the money to pay for his legal fees, which, mind you, would be quite expensive because Maxwell was going to be working with an infamous lawyer known for getting people off who are clearly guilty of murder. This lawyer has managed to get his clients found not guilty even when they have literally confessed to the crime, and even in cases where evidence is just overwhelming. And then in the case where they might still be found guilty, he manages to get them as little time behind bars as possible. Clearly at this point, he still has a level of confidence that he might be able to get off lightly or completely, but soon a witness testimony would appear that threw the whole case into a new light and absolutely screwed Maxwell's chances of being seen as anything other than a depraved, evil psycho killer that could well have turned into a serial killer. A confidential informant had brought themselves forward to the police because they believed that they had some very disturbing, yet very crucial information about Max and about this case. This person was one of Maxwell's friends that he had known for a few years, someone that he trusted, someone that he spoke quite freely around and clearly felt that he could voice some of his darkest desires in front of. This informant told the police that on the 5th of March 2024, that's a month before Sade's murder, he had gone over to Max's house to hang out, and that was when he first became aware of the existence of that torture dungeon in his basement. Max took him down there to show him around, and he was clearly very proud of everything that he had set up. I think at first he was kind of implying that its purpose was just for sex, but if that was the case, then why was the whole entire room covered in plastic tarp? Literally the whole entire thing. Not just the floors, but the walls, the ceiling, even lining the sink. He wasn't taking any chances. And that was when Max was actually honest with the friend about what this was all for. He just point blank told him that he had lined everything up down here because he is going to kill someone. He wanted to commit a thrill kill. He wanted to know what it would be like to murder someone, to take someone's life, and to try to get away with it. He had been thinking about this for some time, and not only that, he'd already chosen his victim. This young woman that he'd met about a month ago, Sade Robinson. His plan was to ask her on a date. He'd even anticipated that he might have to ask her a few times, thinking that Sade might initially say no to him. He told the friend that he would ask again and again and again until she agreed. He said that when she eventually said yes, he would take her out, they would have a few drinks, then he would bring her back to his place where he planned to murder her. His plan at this stage was to pull out one of his firearms while they were still upstairs, probably in the living room, and scare her, threaten her, into doing whatever he demanded. He would tell her to walk down to the basement, where he then planned to shoot her dead and chop up her body and scatter it all over the city. This is what he told his friend. According to that informant, Max was really matter-of-fact about the whole thing. There was no emotion attached at any point. And actually, let's just take it back a second, because I told you that his plan was to threaten her with a gun and get her to walk down into the basement herself. She would have seen everything that he had set up and laid out. She will have seen the Dexter-level dungeon down there, covered in plastic tarp and tools and weapons all around. She will have known immediately what kind of fate awaited her in her next moments. She will have been so scared. It's harrowing to think about what might have been going on in her head in those final moments. I can't imagine you'd have ever felt a fear like it in your life. Now, we do have to talk about this informant, by the way, because I genuinely can't believe that this man never went to the police after experiencing everything Max had just told and shown him. What do you mean you're standing in another man's basement that is covered in plastic tarp, lining the entire room? There are power tools laid out, saws, knives, guns. He's saying that he has a plan to kill that he is clearly putting into action right in front of you, and you don't go to the police immediately? A murderer could have been literally stopped in his tracks before he committed it. A death could have been prevented. A life could have been saved. But this man, this informant, just stood around and did nothing, only to eventually come to the police anonymously with his tail between his legs when he learnt that Max had actually gone through with his plan. It's just so incredibly frustrating and heartbreaking to know that the outcome of this case could have been different. It never needed to become a case. For a whole year after Sade's death, different vigils and protests and celebrations of her life took place. Local residents had decorated their driveways with the colour pink to honour her. There were even plans to have a memorial made for Sade there in Milwaukee, but this was ultimately scrapped when the supervisors pulling it all together received an onslaught of abusive and racist emails. And Sade's own friends and family had been receiving this kind of senseless abuse this whole entire time. It's literally just pure evil at that point, as if this family hasn't gone through enough without facing this on top of grieving their loved one and finding out all of these awful, awful things that happened to her. And now they're having their plans ruined when they're just trying to honour their lost loved one. The way that Sade's family were treated in the aftermath of her case is truly devastating, but they never let that stop them from being vocal about her case and the changes that need to be made. Now that the memorial wouldn't go ahead, Sade's mother Sheena was looking for other ways to immortalise her daughter and let her legacy and her memory live on, changing the lives of others as it did. And so she set up a foundation named Sade's Voice. It's a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing support to the families of missing Black women and girls. Starting with Wisconsin, Sade's Voice aims to build a whole world where every person, regardless of race or background, receives the right amount of attention and care to their case. It's so important to us here at Outlaw to use this platform to highlight the non-profit organisations that families of victims have set up to honour their loved one's legacy. It's such an inspiring display of strength, and it impresses me immensely every single time. I think it's such an incredible thing to do. And so the link to Sade's Voice Foundation will be below in the description. Please do take a look and learn about what they do, and if you have the means, a donation to their cause would go a long way for the safety of Black girls in Wisconsin. Now, back to the case. Maxwell Anderson's murder trial began on the 28th of May 2025, and up until this point, he had refused to cooperate with investigators. And actually, that wasn't about to change at this point. I don't know why I said it like it was going to change. He refuses to give away any kind of motive, explanation, or reasoning for why he did what he did to Sade, which is the worst part of it all. It's one thing to not give information to investigators so they're struggling to solve the case, but it's a whole other level of evil to deny a grieving family any kind of closure or answers. During the trial, it was revealed that Max had actually taken photos of Sade on his phone back at his house while she was either unconscious or even dead. It's not entirely clear what the context is, but what is clear is that Sade was not an active participant in what was happening to her in these photos. In one of them, Max has his hand on her right breast, and in the very next photo, he is holding her breast in his hand after he had cut it off of her body. He had tried deleting these images, but no image is ever truly deleted forever. Obviously, investigators were able to recover them. And with all of this grotesque evidence piled high, it wasn't looking good for Maxwell, especially because a majority female jury had been chosen for this trial, for the case of an innocent young woman who had simply been living her life, going on a date, something most young women do. This is a jury that could relate to Sade. They could see her as their friend, as their daughter, as their sister, or even as themselves. There was also a female judge on this trial as well, and statistically, women feel more confident handing guilty verdicts to male perpetrators of sexually motivated crimes against women. So it really wasn't looking good for Maxwell. His defense, like I said, gave no motive, no reason as to why he killed Sade, other than insisting that he actually just didn't do it. Instead, they complain about the police department spending too much money investigating the case, which is just bullshit and also so irrelevant to anything right now. Who cares how much it costs to get to this point? The fact is that we're here and the evidence against you has been found. Throughout the trial, more evidence was brought up, like some grainy CCTV footage that showed a tall figure dumping something in the park, believed to be footage of Maxwell disposing of Sade's body parts. Let's not forget, they were also going to get those women up as witnesses to tell the court how they had seen Maxwell hop out of Sade's car, light it on fire in broad daylight, and walk away as if it was nothing. And then, of course, there was the DNA evidence, including a new piece, which was Maxwell's grey hoodie from the night of the murder that had been found bundled up in his neighbour's bin. It was covered in Sade's blood and his own DNA. Look, there's no getting away with murder here. It took the jury all of 40 minutes to deliberate and return with a guilty verdict. Maxwell Anderson would pay in time for what he did to Sade. When he's read the verdict, he actually, for the first time in this whole case, looks like he's experiencing emotion. He looks as if he's going to cry. And then you remember, it's only because it's over himself. He never cared about anyone but himself. Sade's family gave really strong emotional statements. Both her younger sister, Adriana, and her mother were pleading for Max to be given the maximum sentence. And it's truly heartbreaking what her family went through, learning all of that information of what this man did to Sade and what she went through in those final moments. And thank God for that guilty verdict, because I, like everyone else, really believed that they stopped a serial killer in the making. And you know what? We might actually have evidence that he was heading in that direction, because during all of this, another girl had gotten in touch with journalists saying that Maxwell Anderson had taken her out for a date and taken her back to his house, just like he had with Sade, and he tried to make her go down to the basement with him.
So I got a little bit of a tour, and he was like, do you want to see the basement? And I was like, no, I'm okay. He's like, it's creepy down there. And I was like, no, that's okay.
The woman also said that he had dug a really large hole in his backyard, and actually it was still there at the time that he was caught for Sade's murder. So who knows what or who that hole was intended to be for. Maxwell Anderson had a terrifying pattern in his behaviour. It should have never gotten to a point where he killed even one woman, but I actually want to cast your minds back to when police searched his home and they found blood in his bedroom and in his bathroom that wasn't his, that wasn't Sade's. It was never actually identified at all. And that is absolutely horrifying to think about, that there could have been other victims prior to Sade that we are completely unaware of. And that clearly, if that is the case, those victims will not have seen any kind of justice. It's all so bleak. But at least Maxwell Anderson would be off the streets and out of society forevermore, because the judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Lock him up, throw away the fucking key. Sade Robinson was 19 years old. 19! And already she had achieved so much more than he had at the age of 33 when they met. For a start, she had graduated early. She had a degree. She was an exemplary employee, a precious daughter, a beautiful friend. She was bright, she was bubbly, she made everyone around her so happy. She was going to prosper and do amazing things in her life. But instead, Maxwell Anderson murdered her in the most evil way possible. Outside the pizza shop that Sade worked at, a mural of her was painted to commemorate her and to remember her. It's such a beautiful painting. She has a halo and she's up in the clouds, finally resting. There is an epidemic right now of men murdering girls. We are literally living through a femicide emergency. Until men are able to treat this with the same fear and seriousness that women do, I don't think we'll be able to break out of it. We know that both in America and here in Britain, we have active politicians and men in governmental power with heinous allegations and guilty charges against them for violence towards women. How on earth are we going to be able to implement public safety for women and girls when they're not even safe with the men who control our governments, the ones who make the policies and uphold the laws? We are told so often to prioritise our own safety, to wear different clothes, to not go to certain places at certain times because you never know who could be lurking there and what they might want to do to you. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how women try to prepare and arm themselves, if a man wants to kill her, he's going to kill her. The issue needs to be dealt with at the root, with the men, not with the women who fall victim time and time and time again. What you see in the news and in content like this is only the tip of the iceberg of this epidemic. So many women are being killed every week at the hands of men, and it is all of our responsibility to scream and shout and get something done about it. We need to see change. That's change in our governments and policies, changes in the media, from institutions, changes from us on an individual level. I think men especially need to recognize the sexism and misogyny that underlies each of these crimes. And of course, it doesn't start with murder or abuse, does it? It starts with small sexist comments and dodgy patterns around women. Call out your mates, correct them, confront them on their bad behaviour. All of us have a part to play in ending the femicide emergency that we are currently facing. Now, as we come to the end of this episode, I want to take one last moment to remember Sade Robinson for the beautiful girl that she was inside and out, for her love of novels, cooking for her loved ones, her dream to join the forces and to protect others, for how independent she made herself at such a young age, for how much of an incredible woman she was becoming, and most importantly, for how many young women's lives she saved and changed in her wake. From all of us here at Outlaw, we send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Sade Robinson. And that is all we have for this episode. Thank you so much once again for tuning in to Outlaw Podcast. And thank you again to NordVPN for collaborating with us to make this episode. Remember, you can get an exclusive NordVPN deal plus 4 months extra when you click the link down below in the description. That's nordvpn.com/Eleanor. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a like, leave us a comment. I love reading the conversation that happens with every single one of these episodes. I love how respectful and thoughtful all of you are. I can't appreciate you enough. This audience means the world to me. If you're listening to this episode on a podcast platform, please rate us 5 stars. Again, leave us a comment. I've been checking the comment sections on the podcast platforms. But all of that being said, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.